Today we're going to focus on choosing a ProjectWise client and some of the prerequisites for choosing that client. Before I get into the presentation itself, I'm going to go ahead and just bring up a topic schedule for upcoming seminars over the next little more than 2 weeks. So we're going to be doing these webinars both at this time for folks here in North America as well as Europe, and then we'll be doing it at 11 a.m. UTC plus 8 for folks in Asia, Australia, and further afield. You're welcome to attend any of the sessions that you like. Yesterday I talked about working from home as an overview, so I talked in detail just what are the different clients we have from a ProjectWise point of view, the tools we can use with the ProjectWise 365 services. I'm going to do a bit of a review of that today for those that weren't on the call yesterday. But I'm going to focus a little bit more on the personas. So what tool would you use depending on your role within the organization if you are working outside of the office or working at home? And then, as I mentioned yesterday, my colleague Mark here for the Americas and Europe will be speaking to a lot of the different types of configurations, both for users and administrators, in some of the upcoming sessions over the next week or so. And then into week 3, we'll talk about some of the tools. So I'll be focused on the PDF approval process using our PDF markup tools available for ProjectWise, and then my colleague Teresa, for both the Americas and Europe, we'll be talking about our Deliverables Management service, how you configure that, as well as the process for both sending transmittals and submittals. And then we're going to do it all again for us, approximately 12 hours, 13 hours later. For you folks that are in Asia and Australia, it will be essentially the next day. So we'll be covering the same topics. That'll be my colleagues. In Asia, we'll be doing these sessions for you. If you're not able to attend, that's not a problem. We're going to be sharing all these online, including the one that I did yesterday, which was the ProjectWise overview. You can follow us on Facebook. We'll be posting the recordings and sessions there daily, as well as on YouTube. And you can also look at the community channel, which is where you likely found out about these sessions in the first place. So I am not going to go into the same level of detail as I did yesterday, but I think it's part of a review when we talk about what clients do you want to use within ProjectWise. I'd like to put them in perspective. So high level, what is ProjectWise? I expect most of you are familiar, but if you're not, it helps project teams to manage, share, and distribute engineering project content and review that in really a single source of truth or a single platform. As many of you know, it does include desktop tools for designers to manage and collaborate inside your design applications. So whether that be MicroStation, whether it be AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Revit, and so on, we have that integration built into those tools directly with ProjectWise. So for instance, if I open up a MicroStation file and then I go and I want to attach a cell library, I'm going to look in ProjectWise rather than looking back at my local network or looking in Windows. But as we covered yesterday, and I'll speak to these again today, we have numerous web services, web-based services available beyond just what the designers might want to use for managers, for reviewers, consultants, and document controllers. And I'll speak to some of those in the context of who would want to use those today. So again, the ProjectWise Explorer, we spoke to this in a bit of detail yesterday, but it's an actual desktop client that gets installed on either your laptop or your workstation. It is a very familiar tool to a lot of folks because it has the look and feel of Windows Explorer, as we spoke to in some detail as well yesterday. So on the left, I would have the equivalent of what you might imagine as folders in Windows, but in here we're looking at ProjectWise work areas. And when we select a work area, we can look at further work areas below that, or folders and documents within those projects. As I mentioned, typically the icon to the left of the file name gives me a good indication of the application that is associated with that. Things like a pencil tell me I need to edit the drawing. A book would indicate it's read-only to me. If I see a lock symbol, as we see over here, that means it's locked, and in this case, it's locked by another user. In this case, a person called the document approver. But what's key really about the ProjectWise Explorer from a client point of view is it has that integration with your design applications. And that's really key. It's really an ideal tool for people who are actually doing design work, power users that are making changes to their drawings. At the same time, it has the full breadth of ProjectWise in the sense that all the capabilities that you can imagine are available through the Explorer client, including advanced searching capabilities. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday, being able to search on metadata, being able to search spatially. And these searches, as we spoke to, can also be saved. So you can do them on the fly or an ad hoc search, but for those that maybe want to quickly go in and look for a particular set of information, we can have saved searches for them. It's a single click and they find the information they're looking for. Then we spoke yesterday to ProjectWise Webview, which is essentially a cloud-based service. As the name implies, it's only for reading. We don't have the ability to make edits through ProjectWise Webview, but it's a very intuitive, easy to understand interface where we access data at the data source level. And as I mentioned yesterday, data sources really are just like ProjectWise servers. If you're a large organization, maybe there's servers within your own country or they're around the world, and you may only have access to certain data sources. But when you log into WebView, you'll see the data sources available. You can click on the data source. That will show you a ProjectWise work area. When you go into that work area, you can further drill down into that to see maybe folders, subfolders, documents, and so on. And with ProjectWise Webview, again, it's strictly for viewing, so we don't have the ability to make edits or changes, but we can access the documents locally to view them. And then in yesterday's session, which as I mentioned is available via recording, if you're looking for more details, we spoke to ProjectWise Web Connections, which is one of what we refer to as our ProjectWise 365 services. And again, I'll do an overview of these as we go through the different personas of who would be using ProjectWise in a few minutes. But what that provides is project level web access to information in ProjectWise. So whereas ProjectWise Webview, view only at the data source level, here we're at the project level. So what that means is I've logged in through my connection client, and I've gone into a specific project, and when I go into that project, I see all of the ProjectWise 365 services that you see below. And when I go into Web Connections, I would see any connections that have been set up for that specific project. Now, of course, the main difference here between Web Connections and WebView is I have the ability to make changes. There's numerous capabilities that you can see here. I can create new versions from ProjectWise Web Connections. I can change workflow states. If I want to open up a design file, I can open that right from WebView with the ProjectWise Explorer. And there's also some numerous tools for doing markups with PDFs, which I'm going to speak to in another session in a week or so. And I'll talk about those capabilities. But the default behavior here, if I were to click on that ceiling fan, which is a PDF in this case, it would launch PDF markup. And that would provide multi-user access to create markups and red lines in real time on that PDF as part of a review process. So if we summarize the three clients and look at this in terms of a matrix, so we talked about ProjectWise Explorer, which requires an installation locally. And then we talked about ProjectWise Webview and ProjectWise Web or Web Connections. So who would want to use the different tools? When would you want to use them? So typically your designers, they're the folks that require that design integration. They're making changes in Civil 3D and in MicroStation. in open roads, whatever the tool may be, they're actually wanting to make changes. And so they would want to be using the ProjectWise Explorer, which includes that full integration, as well as the ability to use the workflows within ProjectWise. So if I'm wanting to push a document to a different state in a workflow, I can do that directly from ProjectWise Explorer. Now, for folks that are doing reviewing, but don't necessarily need to go into the actual design applications, ProjectWise Web would be an appropriate choice for those folks. So within there, they can do drawing reviews through our iTwins design review tools. They can do markups, as I mentioned, through the PDF markup tools that I'll speak to in another session. For engineers that, again, don't necessarily need to make changes to designs, ProjectWise Web would also be a suitable tool for them, where they're wanting to access engineering documents, maybe Word documents, spreadsheets, and they're also wanting to be part of a workflow process. So where they're wanting to approve something and change the state of the document, they can do that through a browser with ProjectWise Web. For folks that are doc controllers or document managers, they could be using the connection client, but they have a little bit more functionality within their specific role through ProjectWise Explorer. And the reason for that, as we'll see when we talk about the 365 services again, when we review that in a few minutes, is it gives them the ability to create transmittals and submittals and get those documents right from the single source of truth inside of ProjectWise. So they could be using either the ProjectWise Explorer with the Deliverables Management connector, or possibly using a browser through the connection client. In terms of project managers, so folks that are maybe more interested in simply just viewing documents or reports, ProjectWise Webview would be very likely a suitable tool for them. They wouldn't require any installation. They don't need to make changes to those documents. They only need to view them. As far as folks that are external to your organization, so consultants, third parties, maybe different vendors you're working with that are requiring to make changes through the different design tools, they would also be wanting to use ProjectWise Explorer just as if they were internal to your organization. And again, that's really due to that integration with the design application that's available, whether it be MicroStation or AutoCAD or whatever tool they're using. If they're external, but they're not necessarily needing to make changes through the design tools or through the CAD tools, then ProjectWise Web would be suitable for them, where they're wanting to access, similar to an engineer, engineering documents and engineering workflows. And then finally, if you've got any type of external viewer who really just requires view-only access, they would be able to use ProjectWise Webview for that through their browser, which would allow them to download documents and open them, but not make any changes. So if I summarize the three clients in another way, we can look at the ProjectWise Explorer, again, our desktop client that does require installation and configuration. Whereas we look at ProjectWise Web and WebView, neither require any installation. There's no add-ons, there's no plugins required on your browser. And you can see a list of the supported browsers over on the right. Those same users in terms of access control, and what I mean by access control is just what do they have access to? What's their security level, if I could put it that way. So with ProjectWise Web, that just follows the same security as if they were using ProjectWise Explorer. So if they're able to see a folder or a document in ProjectWise Explorer, they have the exact same capabilities if they were accessing through a browser with ProjectWise Web. Whereas ProjectWise WebView, no matter what they're accessing, it's only going to be read-only unless they have not been given access at all to a particular folder. If they don't see it in ProjectWise Explorer, then they're not going to see it in WebView either. In terms of the scope, ProjectWise Web, as we mentioned, is project-based. So when I go and log into my connection client, I access a project, and that's At the project level is where I access ProjectWise Web Connections, whereas ProjectWise Webview is really across the whole list of data sources or ProjectWise servers that are available to me. So next, I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes again. We talked about the ProjectWise 365 services in some detail yesterday, but again, these would be accessed all at the project level, and they're kind of just additional levels of scope beyond, call it the 3 clients that we've spoken to already. We talked about the ProjectWise Explorer, ProjectWise Webview, and then ProjectWise Web Connections. So here at the project level, when I go into that project, I would see all these services down along the bottom, including the ProjectWise Web Connections, which we've already spoken to. And what are the personas? So if I've put together a slide to sort of look at this in maybe a different way, just to take on a different perspective. But if we create sort of a few groupings of types of users. So I put, someone who sets up and initiates a project or a project administrator, along with data managers, or what we often know as document controllers, folks that are creating transmittals and receiving submittals and having to manage all that information. And then we've got the actual users of what I call end users of ProjectWise. So folks that are having to collaborate within the design. They're working in MicroStation or working in Open Roads. They're collaborating with their internal and external ProjectWise users in the project. And at the same time in there, we have reviewers, engineers that are maybe having to go in and make changes to different documents or review different documents. And then, of course, we've got our external collaborators, our clients, our consultants, suppliers out there. And finally, a group of project managers who are maybe not so interested in actually making changes to document, but they want insights into the state of the project. They have reporting needs where they want to know where they're at in a project. So let's talk about some of these services and who might use them. And again, if you want more detail, you can review in yesterday's session. But at a high level, Project Share is really a mechanism to allow us to quickly and exchange information, facilitate that collaboration among participants on the project. One of the keys here is it does not require access to a ProjectWise data source. So it's very easy to use. It provides bidirectional capability between one's desktop and the share service in the cloud. So the idea is within the share service, I can go in and I can specify a folder that I want to share. I can set that up for synchronization. And anytime someone adds a document to that share, for instance, in the architectural folder you see up in the upper screenshot, that would be synchronized down below with the architectural folder for that project back on my desk. So in this case, I've got 3 different projects that you can see down below. I'm looking at a cutout of Windows Explorer here on my local desktop. There's 3 different projects there for which I have shared folders. In each project, I've shared 2 different folders, and those would be synced with the information in the cloud. But a very useful tool to quickly provide access, and a simple way to provide access to documents and folders. And really, in terms of who would want to be accessing Project Share, we really see this across the whole gamut of users of ProjectWise. Whether you're a ProjectWise administrator, whether you're a document controller, an end user, or an external supplier, or an external consultant, or a project manager, really this could be a useful tool for anyone on the project. And again, when we say CC down below, that's just referring to the connection client, or what you might think of as the ProjectWise, the portal, the web portal. So either through the portal or through their desktop, they can have access to ProjectWise Share. I've mentioned Deliverables Management before, and my colleague Teresa will be speaking to this in more detail next week. But for Deliverables Management, it's really a tool for managing deliverables, and by deliverables we mean issuing of transmittals, receiving of submittals, requests for information, It provides a lot of tools for us to create drafts and templates for future issue that we can reuse. As I mentioned yesterday, it automatically generates a cover letter for that transmittal that can be modified to your organization's needs. And one of the keys really to deliverables management is it provides that all important audit trail. So all of the communication that takes place, whether it be a request for information or the receipt of a transmittal, all gets tracked and monitored so that I can go back. In the case of litigation, I can say, who said what, when, and have a report of that that's very easy to access to provide that information as needed. There are two different ways, as we mentioned yesterday, for accessing deliverables management. The first would be through the ProjectWise Explorer. And through the ProjectWise Explorer, I spoke to this in a bit of detail yesterday, so I won't go into it too much today, but this would typically be a doc controller would probably want to be accessing deliverables management through the ProjectWise Explorer because they can go in, they can create a transmittal using the documents that are stored and maintained in ProjectWise. At the same time, when they receive a submittal, they can pull those documents right into the single source of truth that is ProjectWise and have all that information centrally stored. But they can also use the ProjectWise Explorer for generating requests for information. And again, we'll see the whole audit trail maintained here as well. But deliverables management, as we spoke to, can also be accessed directly from the Connect Center or the web portal. So these could be non-ProjectWise users who wish to share documents with third parties or consultants and vendors supplying requested documents. So similar to within ProjectWise Design Integration, we can include recipients, we can set a schedule for acknowledgement and response times and attach local network documents. Then within the Connect Center portal, documents can also be reviewed using our PDF markup tools, which again, I'll speak to later in a more detailed session. So who are the personas here who would want to access deliverables management? And really here, I think we see all types of ProjectWise users would want access to deliverables management, but they may want to access that through different clients. So as I mentioned, document controllers probably would be using the ProjectWise Explorer, but they could use the connection client as well and access that directly through a browser. Folks doing engineering reviews and design collaboration would still be consistent and be using the ProjectWise Explorer to access deliverables management. Whereas external parties who don't necessarily have any direct connection to ProjectWise could simply use the Connection Center to, for instance, create a submittal that you as an owner might receive back into your organization. And similar for project managers who are just having reporting needs, they would want to see the state of deliverables, where they sit, where they're at, and they could access all that information through the Connection Center. So next thing we spoke to yesterday was ProjectWise Insights, which was really the next generation of ProjectWise performance dashboards that just unlocks the intelligent information stored in projects so you can make more timely and data-driven decisions. And we spoke to some of the many types of reports that ProjectWise Insights provides. So the ability to track documents by discipline, by workflow state, being able to review transmittals and RFI statuses to see the state of those deliverables, where they're maybe being held up in the process. Similarly with workflows, we spoke to the ability to see how many documents are in a workflow, who's reviewing those. I can look at a particular time along my timeline to see the exact state on that particular date. But in general, what ProjectWise Insights is providing us is the ability to see our overall project health and the ability to create very quickly configurable reports right through the interface, or additionally through the power of Microsoft BI that is provided directly inside the application. So if we look at who might want to have access into ProjectWise Insights, I think we see this less as being the designers and not necessarily engineering reviewers, but rather folks like document controllers. They would be very interested, of course, in the deliverables and what are the state of a review process for a transmittal that's been sent out. Similarly, for external collaborators, they've provided a submittal, and maybe that's under review by the owner. They're wanting to get feedback as to that review and the state of that review, and they can see all that through their connection client. And of course, project managers who, again, are not necessarily making changes, but have strong reporting needs, ProjectWise Insights, of course, is going to be a very useful tool for them to access through the Connect Center. Then the last thing topic that I covered in yesterday's session relates to the management of issues that arise in a project. As I mentioned, issues and forms are very closely tied together in that when I create or I generate an issue, the mechanism I use to capture that issue is through a form that I can configure at the project level. Project level forms can also be shared among projects. So if I modify a shared form, the changes will be seen across all projects that make use of it. Issues has a pretty broad spectrum of users, as there are those who want to be aware of the issues on a project and those that create those issues through the various tools and services of ProjectWise. So here we're looking at a dashboard that gives me visibility into all my known issues. And if I look down below, I can see the state of an issue. Is it open or closed? Who is it assigned to? Has it been resolved? I can see date information related to those issues. But those issues can be created through numerous tools. So for instance, here we're looking at how I would create an issue in the PDF markup tools. And as I mentioned, typically when we create an issue, it's always linked to a configurable form that we can easily set up in the forms tool. So in this case, I've got an issue on the PDF, and I've got various fields that I've configured in my form, things like a due date, a status, who it's assigned to, a description. Issues can also have attachments assigned to them and uploaded to them as well. But issues could also be created through a design review. So this could be a slightly different persona than someone who's maybe doing a PDF markup. Here they're wanting to look at the design. And in this case, I've already created the issue, and the form itself, I can see over in the right, this is a similar form to what we showed with the PDF markup, that they've gone in and filled in the required information. And part of that design review can include a snapshot of the model itself. But that design review could also include a markup. So I can fill out the form, I can have the snapshot. At the same time, I can mark that up, and even though I'm looking at a 3D model, when we go into the markup tools, it gives us a 2D view for which to draw different information, to add notes in here. So here I have some concerns about the chiller on the top of this building in downtown Toronto, and I just made a note on that. But issues could also be created by mobile users. So this could be maybe project managers out in the field. And here's an example where we're accessing through Edge Mobile. So I've gone in and maybe it's a safety related issue. So I'm out on the project, on the job site, and I've noticed some loose wires in this case in the lobby of the building. So I've gone in and I filled that out in the form. I've gone in and I've activated my camera, so I go to the attachments tab on that same form as I'm creating this issue, and I've taken a photo of those loose wires and attached that as part of the issue. And then if I have any additional comments, I can go into the comments area and fill that in on my tablet out in the field and include that as all part of that issue. So with our issues management combined with our forms tool, it really gives us a great mechanism to catalog and track all those issues and report on them. So if we look at the various personas that are wanting to access the issues resolution capabilities, again, similar to a lot of our services and tools within ProjectWise, it could really be anyone throughout the organization. The mechanism for them accessing it, for a large part of them, would just be the connection center. However, in the case of maybe an external collaborator, maybe someone who's out in the field or a project manager, they could also use Edge Mobile to go in and create those issues. But in all cases, everyone can access and view those issues through the connection client, whether they're an administrator, a document controller, a ProjectWise user, or an external participant. So in my last slide, and we may have had questions throughout, but I've got a few Bentley colleagues on the call who have probably been answering those as we go through, but if not, we'll open it up to further questions. To summarize the 3 clients, I put this in more of a spreadsheet form earlier, but we can look at this in another way in terms of what we would require for each of these clients. I think the client installation is pretty straightforward in that first column. ProjectWise Explorer obviously needs to be installed locally on your workstation or desktop. With Web and WebView, nothing's required. All you need is a browser. Open up your browser and you're good to go. From a configuration point of view, the same is true from a client perspective. ProjectWise Explorer has some network configuration settings within it that would allow you to talk to your network back in the office if you're working at home. Web and WebView, again, you just need a browser. From a ProjectWise server point of view, and this would be more of interest to ProjectWise administrators, but for those of you that are users, you could make note of this for your ProjectWise administrators who may not be on the call. If you're using the ProjectWise Explorer and you have an on-premise configuration, and what I mean by that is you're not using our managed services, ProjectWise is not in the cloud for you, and you don't have a VPN connection at home, then on the server you would be required to have the ProjectWise Gateway service installed. There is no ProjectWise project required in order to use the ProjectWise Explorer, and that's really what our last column is speaking to. From a server point of view for ProjectWise Web, the Web Services Gateway is only required for an on-premise environment. So again, if you're using our managed services, then there's no requirement. There's nothing for you to do. You open up your browser and you're good to go. That said, you do need a ProjectWise project configured because ProjectWise Web is accessed at the project level. So it requires you to create a ProjectWise project in the cloud through the connection center and then add a connection between a work area, which is at the ProjectWise data source level, and the ProjectWise project. And then finally for ProjectWise WebView, it's not required to have a ProjectWise project in the cloud, but your cloud service administrator needs to add a connection to each data source you want to make available to your users in ProjectWise WebView. So with that, I'm now going to open it up to questions. Does ProjectWise Web support workflow rules engine? So it does support ProjectWise workflow. I might specifically the workflow rules engine. I don't know, Teresa, if you're able to help me out with that question.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Yes.
So,
Hi, everyone. So,
ProjectWise Web
ProjectWise
right
Web
now supports
right
workflow
now
rules
supports
engines,
workflow
and
rules engines.
in
And
these days we
in
are
these
delivering
days,
or we
we
are
are delivering or we are
deploying
deploying
the ability to
the
modify
ability
attributes
to
in
modify
ProjectWise Web.
attributes in ProjectWise Web.
So you will have full
So
support of
you
rules
will have
engines.
full support of rules engines.
I think this week we are
I
delivering the
think this
ability
week we
to
are delivering the
modify
ability to
attributes to the
modify
ProjectWise Web.
attributes to ProjectWise Web.
Perfect. Thanks, Teresa. Neil asked, does WebView require a passport? And I guess the answer is we've been informed as of April, ProjectWise WebView is free. So assuming you're on a ProjectWise project, that will be free to users. So the licensing requirements for ProjectWise, we could go into some detail here, but we have the concept of ProjectWise visas and ProjectWise passports. So ProjectWise visas are typically for users that are requiring access to the ProjectWise Explorer. So anything that you can do if you're using the ProjectWise Explorer would require you access to a visa. If you're wanting to just use the ProjectWise 365 services and only accessing through a browser, then only a passport is required. Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending. Do feel free to reach out via email if you have further questions. Again, my email is david.sheeran at bentley.com. I'm really happy you folks have taken the time out of your busy days to attend today. We'll be continuing these webinars over the next 2 weeks, so please do join in. They'll be 10 a.m. Eastern for the Americas, and again, 11 a.m. plus UTC plus 8 for folks in Asia and Australia.